Months had passed since Claudette's and Mark's arrests, since the shadows cleared from Sabina's name, and Celeste stepped fully into the work. Spring came and went in a blur of blooming magnolias, whispered rumors, and long walks past houses still bearing faded Mardi Gras beads. The soft clink of glass and the faint aroma of bay leaf and lavender filled the air as Celeste knelt beside a half-unpacked shipping crate. The shop was closed. It always was on Sundays. No readings, no baths, no spell work, just quiet. Even God rested, her grandmother used to say. Celeste honored that, mostly. She shifted a dozen 7-day candles into place on the bottom shelf, their waxy colors catching the shaft of sun that slipped through the edges of the shuttered front windows. The scent of wax and cardboard mixed with the ever-present undercurrent of frankincense embedded in the floorboards. Stacks of Palo Santo and Florida water waited near the register, still needing price tags. She stood wiping her brow with the hem of her t-shirt. The air was thick already. June in New Orleans never waited politely at the door. That's when she felt it. Not a sound, not a knock, but a presence. Celeste froze mid-step, her hands still curled around the edge of the shelf. Through the narrow slits of the front shutters, the sunlight dimmed, just slightly. A shape moved outside, not walking past, lingering. She stayed still, breath shallow, listening. Nothing. Then something. The faint shift of weight on the porch. A creak of the floorboard that only someone standing just to the left of the door would make. Whoever it was didn't knock, didn't call out, just stood there. Celeste tiptoed to the front window, careful to avoid the warped spot in the floor that always gave her away. She leaned her head toward the shutters, angled to catch a glimpse through the thin slat. But by the time she reached it, the shadow was gone. Gone like fog, silent and swift. She waited. 30 seconds, then another 30. Stillness. Celeste counted to 10, then gently unlocked the deadbolt. The door gave its usual sigh as she pulled it open and stepped out onto the stoop. Heat rose from the sidewalk like breath. She looked left, then right. No one. But just as she started to step back inside, something on the welcome mat caught her eye. A smear of powder, grayish with a slight glint, like crushed bone mixed with ash. And just beyond it, nestled at the edge of the step, lay a small, crumpled form. A dead bird. Its wings were tucked tight, head twisted too far back. A dark, brittle smear ran from beak to chest. Celeste's heart skipped. Not random, not a cat's kill. This was placed, purposeful, a message. She didn't need to be told which kind. Miss Lena was just getting back from the 10 o'clock mass at St. Peter Claver, shoes clicking gently on the sidewalk. She had just turned the corner onto the block when she noticed the front door of Sabina's apothecary cracked open. It stopped her mid-step. Celeste didn't open on Sundays, everybody knew that, not even for special orders. Miss Lena slowed in front of her own shop, Lena's Nail Gallery, and squinted toward the apothecary. Sunlight lanced through the narrow gap in the door, falling over the edge of the stoop. The light caught something on the ground. At first she thought it was a rag or an old bit of trash, but no, it was feathers. Miss Lena crossed herself. She was about to call out when Celeste stepped into the doorway, her head wrapped in a dark cloth, her arms bare, feet steady. Her eyes scanned the stoop, then lifted, not to look at Miss Lena, but beyond her, as if watching something leave that Miss Lena couldn't see. Then Celeste went back inside. Miss Lena stood on her stoop and waited, though she wasn't sure why. Something in her spirit told her to bear witness. She'd seen things in her day. Being born and raised in New Orleans meant you didn't scare easy. But something about the stillness that fell over the block made her take a step back. Moments later, Celeste emerged again, this time with a silver bowl and a bundle of something wrapped in black cloth. She knelt beside the dead bird like it was a sacred text, and with the grace of a woman well practiced, began her work. Miss Lena couldn't say exactly what changed first. The light, maybe. The sun seemed to pause, the shadow from the shop awning deepening just enough to feel intentional. Then came the sound, or rather the absence of it. No birds, no cars, not even the hum of the street lamp that usually buzzed in the heat. Celeste didn't touch the bird. She poured something, a dark liquid that steamed on contact, and circled the bird with a motion too quick for Miss Lena to follow. The powder around it hissed. Then came the smell, not chemical, not sweet, but deep, rooted, like rain hitting hot iron mixed with tobacco and turned earth. Miss Lena didn't pretend to understand the words Celeste spoke, if she spoke at all. It was hard to tell. The air around her shimmered like heat off asphalt, but the ground stayed cool, still. By the time Celeste stood, the bird was gone. Not removed. Gone. The powder had turned pale, almost white. The step was clean, steaming, and the scent that lingered smelled faintly of salt and ash. Celeste closed the door without saying a word. Miss Lena stayed on her stoop a few seconds longer before whispering, more to herself than anyone.
That girl walked with something old, and somebody out there just made a mistake.
By 11:06 a.m., Sabina's apothecary was already humming. Not packed, but steady. The kind of steady that made the register warm and the floors carry just enough foot traffic to scuff the polish. The incense burners by the front display case curled with lemongrass and eucalyptus, and the sound of quiet conversation wove through the air like a well-stitched lining. Celeste stood behind the counter, labeling a fresh batch of road opener oil, when the bell above the door jingled, its chime too light to match the energy that walked in behind it.
Baby, your place is smelling like the inside of a saint's collar.
Tavo, you're out early.
And so are you. I figured I'd catch you while the spirits are still having their coffee.
He sauntered toward the display shelf near the window and picked up a bottle of Florida water, turning it over like he didn't already know the label by heart. Then another, then 2 candles, one white, one yellow.
Your setup's gotten nice, real nice. You reorganize again?
Celeste didn't answer right away. She just handed a young woman a bag with a jar of Van Van oil and a small sachet, then smiled as the customer thanked her and drifted out. I do what feels right. Celeste eyed him, remembering what Sabina once said about his lineage, curanderismo and palo mayombe. He always had an agenda, and where there was Tavo, there was danger. Anything you're looking for besides Florida water and curiosity?
Ooh, she got jokes today. Nah, I just needed to restock a little. Got a cousin coming over who stay bringing her bad luck with her. Figured I'd do a little mopping before she shows up.
Celeste rang up his items without a word. Tavo tapped his manicured nails against the countertop, glancing toward the back of the shop. Another customer was browsing incense blends, and 2 more stood at the altar shelf whispering about which candle to buy for a court date.
You know, I passed by yesterday. Place was all locked up, but I could swear I smelled something. Like my grandmother's altar on All Saints' Day. You burning something special on Sundays now?
Celeste handed him his receipt and a brown paper bag. I rest on Sundays, same as always.
Well, ain't no harm in that. Lord knows the rest of us could learn a thing or two from you.
He tucked the bag under his arm and gave her a once-over that was meant to look playful, but didn't quite land. He turned halfway toward the door, then paused and looked back.
You keeping that little porch clean, sugar? Somebody might drop off something unexpected again.
Celeste's gaze didn't waver. I sweep what needs sweepin'. Tavo laughed, not from his belly but from somewhere just behind his teeth, and let the door swing closed behind him. As he walked down the block, he didn't look back. But he didn't need to. He'd seen enough. The shop was thriving. The girl had power. And someone had already tried to test her. He was just making sure he wasn't the one who'd be next. That night, the city lay heavy under a velvet sky. Rain hadn't come, but the air swelled like it might, thick with anticipation. Celeste fell asleep in her reading chair, head tilted back, a shawl half draped over her shoulders, a single candle still flickering on the altar across the room. She didn't remember drifting off, but she found herself standing in a house she didn't recognize with her eyes, only her bones. The floor creaked like it knew her weight. The shelves were empty but held the memory of oils, powders, bundles of herbs tied in red string. An old botanica, long closed, forgotten by the living maybe, but not by the dead. Beside her stood another woman, brown-skinned like Celeste, but older, cloaked in silence. She said nothing, only lit one candle, then another. Celeste moved through the space as if she'd walked it 1,000 times before. Dust hung in the air like incense, catching specks of dreamlight. Her hands knew what to do. She lit each candle with the reverence of a ritual reborn. Then something stirred. Across the street, the lights in the windows of a crumbling house flickered, then went out. Shapes moved from its porch, gliding silently across the road. They emerged from the mist, 2 pale young women in black Victorian morning dresses, and a large man, his frame hulking, his back to her. He wore a strange costume, ruffled shirt, leather coat, something theatrical and twisted, like he'd walked out of a cabaret in hell. The women's eyes were rimmed with shadow, their hair pinned high. One of them, tall, striking, too still, locked eyes with Celeste. She moved quickly, suddenly, across the yard and ran to the man's side, clinging to his arm like she hadn't seen him in 100 years. Then they were all outside. Celeste stood on the porch. The woman, The leader, Celeste somehow knew, let go of the man and stepped toward her.
Her voice was ice wrapped in velvet. "Why did you come back?"
Celeste blinked. The woman's voice echoed in her mind. Why did you come back? She'd heard that same unspoken question in the way Tavo danced around his curiosity. But this time, it had come from something older, deeper, something that remembered her from before. She didn't understand the question fully, but her answer rose like breath from deep inside her chest. Something happened. I had to. The woman's face tightened, not in fear, but in fury barely contained. Behind her, the second girl whispered something into the man's ear. He never turned around. Then, without warning, they began to fade. Not vanish, but recede, like spirits pulled into the folds of a curtain that hadn't yet closed. The candles behind Celeste went out in unison. The dream snapped. She woke with a sharp breath, hand gripping the arm of the chair. The candle at her altar was still burning low. The air was silent, still. But on the floor near the front door, half hidden beneath the edge of the welcome mat, was a single black rose petal. The bell above the window at Plum Street rang as Celeste stepped away with her order. A small nectar cream with condensed milk drizzled over the top. The heat had settled in like a wet towel wrapped around the city, and the snowball was the only thing standing between her and a full-fledged afternoon sulk. She was just turning to leave when she heard it.
"Well, if it isn't Sabina's granddaughter."
The voice was light, but something about the tone carried a soft little hook in it. Celeste turned, blinking against the sun, and there she was. Bianca. Taller than she remembered. Her honey-blonde hair was pinned in a neat updo that felt more Metairie garden party than French Quarter mystic. Runway model figure, wide sunglasses, a breezy linen sundress, and that smile. Wide, warm, watchful. Bianca. Damn, I haven't seen you since...
"Since before you left for Paris. You look great."
Celeste hugged her back briefly, careful of her snowball. "So do you," Bianca laughed. They stepped aside as a group of teenagers lined up at the window behind them. Bianca gestured toward a shady spot near the curb where her SUV idled with the air conditioner running.
"I let the crew run the shop now. It's good for them, and I get to actually see my family before midnight."
That sounds balanced.
"I've been hearing things about you, you know."
Celeste didn't take the bait. She took a spoonful of her snowball and waited. Bianca smiled again, this time a little slower.
"People say you're doing good work, that the shop's picking up fast."
"Just doing what I was taught." "Yeah, you were taught well." Bianca took a sip from her own snowball, something orange and sour-looking.
"You know how this city is. Folks are already wondering who you're aligned with." "Not yet, but give it time. You know New Orleans makes you choose, whether you want to or not."
A silence settled between them for a moment, filled only by the chatter of excited children ordering and the occasional clang from the streetcar line.
"We should catch up properly. Maybe lunch? I want to hear everything, without melting in the sun."
"Sure." Celeste said it the way people say it when they're not sure if it's a promise or a test.
"Good, I'll text you."
She turned and slipped back into her car, the cool rush of air escaping the door as it opened. As she drove away, Celeste stood at the edge of the sidewalk, watching the SUV disappear. Celeste took another spoonful of her snowball. It had started to melt around the edges. Celeste unlocked the front door of the uptown cottage just as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, staining the sky in the color of ripe peaches and blood oranges. She stepped inside, nudged the door closed with her hip, and let the cool of the house settle over her like a second skin. She set the half-melted snowball in the kitchen sink, toeing off her sandals one at a time. The silence of home felt different than the quiet of the shop, less alert, more forgiving, familiar in a way that held her, not watched her. As she moved through the space, she lit the altar candles without thinking, first the one for her grandmother, then the one she always lit when she needed clarity. The flame flared, then steadied. Bianca's words hung in her ears like the leftover scent of strong perfume.
"Folks are already wondering who you're aligned with."
She shook her head, unwrapping her hair and letting it fall loose around her shoulders. That's how it always was in this city. Everyone had to belong to someone, to some current, some circle, some pact. But Celeste had made her choice long before she reopened Sabina's apothecary. She didn't answer to circles. She didn't answer to coalitions. She didn't join hands with those who might slip knives into them when the lights went out. She stood for her blood. She stood with her spirits. The altar flame flickered once, softly, as if in agreement. She stepped into the bathroom and started her bath. Epsom salt, a touch of hyssop, lavender for peace. She'd finish her evening with the kind of cleansing that didn't come from smoke or oil, but from intention. That quiet kind that reminded her who she was before the city's whispers tried to shape her. As the tub filled, she leaned against the doorway, arms folded, and let herself speak the truth aloud. Soft, but firm. I don't choose sides. I don't take vows to people. My spirits are my circle, and they've never let me down. Outside, the wind picked up just enough to rattle the leaves along the curb. Inside, Celeste closed her eyes and exhaled. She would walk this path the way she always had, alone, but never without power. It was late Wednesday morning when Alexa walked into Sabina's apothecary for the first time. The bell above the door chimed like it always did, but this time Celeste felt it in her chest before she even looked up. The air shifted, not cold, not warm, just precise. She didn't look up right away. She finished bundling a set of rue and lavender sticks for the older woman at the counter, thanked her with a nod, then finally glanced toward the door. She said, voice flat but polite. The woman who entered didn't carry herself like a stranger. She floated into the shop like it was a boutique opening, eyes wide, arms relaxed, a studied ease that said she'd practiced this arrival in the mirror. She was tall, easily over 5'9" in her heeled sandals, with auburn waves cascading over her shoulders in studied disarray. Her sunglasses were perched high on her head, her white linen shirt crisp, and her jeans designer cut to look effortless. Around her neck, a delicate gold pendant caught the light, subtle but expensive.
"Hi there,"
she said, voice dipped in honey with just enough drawl to sound local, though Celeste was pretty sure it wasn't. Celeste gave her a half smile. "You new to the city?"
"Oh no, I've been here a while,"
she said, extending a hand that Celeste didn't take.
"Alexa, I run Maison Elementaire over in the quarter."
"I've heard of it,"
"I'm sure you have."
Alexa said with a quick smile.
"We've been around a while. I'm usually behind the scenes now. Media stuff, special clients. But my girls keep the place running."
She picked up a small jar of bath salt and turned it in her hand.
"Tavo said you're the real deal. And Bianca mentioned she ran into you the other day. Small world, huh?"
Celeste didn't reply. She just rang up another customer and bagged their items with a quiet, "Take care now." Alexa let her eyes drift around the shop.
"It's got a heartbeat in here. I can feel it. You do the work yourself, or do you have help?"
"I do enough." A small pause, not hostile, just controlled. Alexa smiled.
"I figured I'd stop in, pay respects. It's always good when strong women in this work can connect, collaborate even."
Celeste kept her face neutral. "Collaboration's a funny word in this town."
"Well,"
Alexa said, laughing softly.
"I don't mean anything formal. Just, we all get our hands dirty sometimes. It's good to know who's around when you need backup."
Celeste raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. Alexa reached into her leather tote and pulled out a small silk pouch tied with a purple ribbon. She placed it carefully on the counter between them.
"Just a little something, a housewarming gift, if you will, for your altar."
"Appreciate the gesture," she said simply, her voice giving nothing away. Alexa smiled, but her eyes sharpened.
"I believe in community. There's a lot of competition in this city, but it doesn't always have to be a fight, you know? We could help each other, keep the harmony flowing."
Celeste met her gaze, her expression unreadable. "That's one way to look at it." Alexa let the silence settle for a beat, then nodded and stepped back.
"Well, you know where to find me," she said, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "I'm sure we'll talk again soon."
The bell chimed again as she left, her footsteps fading into the thick air of the late morning. Celeste watched the door for a full 10 seconds after it closed. Then she looked down at the pouch, still untouched, its ribbon now resting just off-center on the counter. She turned and walked to the back, returning a moment later with a white enameled civet. She unlatched a tin of salt, poured a generous mound over the pouch, and used a short, hand-wrapped broom to sweep the entire thing into the basin and placed it in the rear room of the shop. More customers trickled in. She smiled softly, greeted them as usual, but her eyes flicked to the back of the shop every few minutes. She was waiting. It was nearly 2 p.m. when the last customer left. Celeste flipped the sign on the door, locked it, and drew the curtain over the front windows. Then she carried the enamel bowl out back. In the courtyard behind the shop, she laid a salt circle on the ground, flanked by 2 carefully drawn vives, Papa Legba to the left, Ogu to the right. She poured grain alcohol over the salt-covered pouch and struck a single wooden match. The pouch ignited with a sharp hiss, smoke rising in gray coils that turned white at the edges. The flames licked the air like something was trying to leave through them. She didn't speak, didn't chant. The clearing had already begun when Alexa crossed her threshold. This was just the closing. Once the fire died and the pouch was ash, Celeste scooped the remains into a small jar, placed it inside a brown paper sack, and drove to the nearest cemetery. She walked in backwards and didn't go far, just enough to step past the iron gate and kneel near an old crypt shaded by an ancient oak tree. She buried the sack beside its roots and whispered in the secret language. As she left the same way she entered, the spirits of the dead sat up and took notice. The back room of Maison Elementaire was styled like a luxury tea salon with ancestral flair. Curated bookshelves, softly glowing salt lamps, and a meticulously arranged altar visible through a smoky glass divider. The entire place was scrubbed clean of grit, yet rich in a curated atmosphere. Vodou-made boutique, safe, polished, marketable. Alexa sat behind the lacquered counter, sipping a violet-colored herbal tea from a porcelain cup. She was dressed in black silk slacks and a sleeveless ivory blouse. Gold bracelets stacked like charms of intention. Tavo, legs crossed at the ankle, leaned back in the velvet chair like he owned it, even though he'd never sat in it before today.
I have to say,
He murmured, eyes drifting over the room.
you really do make Vodou safe for the cruise crowd.
Alexa smiled, slow and sharp.
I make it palatable. That's why I'm still here and half the others aren't.
Tavo chuckled.
No shade, baby. I'm impressed. Rent in the quarter ain't no joke. But even the high-end girls hit a ceiling eventually.
She raised an eyebrow, not taking the bait.
And you're here to help me break through mine?
Tavo said, leaning in.
To offer you something you can't fake, copy, or buy off Etsy. My work's rooted. Deep, Mexican curanderismo, palo, the real thing. Not the red and black candle in a souvenir shop. I can get you pieces your clientele don't even know they're missing yet.
Alexa set her cup down slowly.
My clientele expects a certain aesthetic.
I'm not talking about changing your vibe. I'm talking about exclusive lines, crossover collections. You want to keep selling the fantasy? Fine. But you and I both know some folks are starting to crave what's authentic. And I know how to give you just enough real to make it irresistible.
She studied him for a long moment.
You want me to feature your work?
I want to produce for you. You get unique inventory, I get a better cut than hustling it out of my living room. Everyone wins.
Alexa reclined slightly.
If someone like, say, Celeste, had something worth watching, you'd want someone who could drop you a little update here and there. Nothing major. Just neighborhood chatter.
You think you'd be able to keep track of her?
She's cautious, but everybody slips eventually, especially when they think no one's watching.
And you'd do that for me, for a price.
I like to keep busy. Consider me your neighborhood whisperer.
Alexa set her cup down and folded her hands. She nodded slowly, as if agreeing, but her gaze stayed cool.
Of course, I'd expect exclusivity. Anything you make for me doesn't end up on someone else's table.
Wouldn't dream of it.
Tavo lied with flair.
Well, you send me your product list. We'll start with a trial run. You pay me what I ask, I let you know what people are saying, especially if they're saying it about your new favorite apothecary queen.
And if you find out she's stepping on my ground, anything out of bounds, you tell me immediately.
As the door clicked shut behind him, Alexa sat still for a moment, her smile settling into something sharper. He thinks this is a negotiation. How quaint, she thought. As Tavo left, he paused just outside the doorway, catching his reflection in the glass. He smiled, thinking to himself, she thinks I'm on her leash. She's adorable. Neither of them noticed the slight ripple in the curtain near the altar, nor did they sense the thin thread of shadow curling along the baseboards. But something old had heard them, and it was listening. The bell above the door gave a lazy jingle as the midday lull wrapped itself around Sabina's apothecary. Celeste was restocking floor washes, humming quietly to herself when the door creaked open and let in the scent of pipe tobacco and damp moss. She looked up and smiled before she even fully registered him. He stood in the doorway, tall and lean in a worn linen shirt and khakis that had seen better days but still held their shape. A polished mahogany walking stick rested in his left hand, its carved handle glinting with symbols only a few still recognized. His skin was deep brown, his face lined but ageless, and his eyes were something else entirely, too knowing, too still.
Well, now you done made the place shine again. Sabina'd be proud, maybe even a little jealous you pulled it off without her.
Celeste wiped her hands on a towel and walked around the counter, that quiet smile still tugging at the corners of her mouth. I didn't do it without her. She's in all of it. Mr. Lem walked slowly through the shop, tapping the base of his stick lightly against the floor like he was listening for echoes beneath the wood. When he reached the altar, he stood in front of Sabina's photo and tipped his head.
You always did take the kind of picture that made a man feel like he needed to sit up straighter.
Celeste caught the faintest blush rise in his cheeks. More than friends, she thought. Probably always were, just no one dared say it out loud.
You keeping up with your protections?
I am.
Keep your porch swept? Salted the thresholds?
He nodded once, satisfied, then reached for her hand. Celeste didn't hesitate. He took it gently, like she was glass and lightning all at once, and held her gaze with a depth that reached far past the present moment. When he spoke, it was almost chant-like. Not loud, not soft, just true.
Blackstrap molasses, ground willow bark, and a splash of Crossroads water. Steep it under a new moon. That'll sober a man's spirit before it breaks his bones.
Celeste blinked once, but said nothing. He went on.
For haints, devil's walking stick root, a feather from a crow that didn't fall in flight, and 3 drops of your own morning spit. Wrap it in black cloth. Bury it near your front step, but never on the left side. Never.
Each word landed like it had always belonged to her. She wouldn't remember the details, not right away. But when the moment came, she would know. Her spirit had heard every word. Mr. Lem finally let go of her hand and leaned back. He gave a soft chuckle and tapped his walking stick twice against the floor.
Just like your grandmother, he said, you got the gift and the fight. But don't forget, sometimes what saves you ain't the power. It's the patience.
Mr. Lem's footsteps echoed faintly against the wood as he turned back to the altar, eyes traveling the length of the apothecary like he was measuring the weight of the walls. He took a seat, resting his hands over the head of the carved walking stick.
Them young ones, he said after a moment, they all jittery since you opened them doors again.
Celeste arched an eyebrow. That so?
Oh, you know it is. Alexa act like she discovered the spirit world herself. And Tavo out here making himself useful to whoever cut a check. Folks smell power like blood and water. And you got old power behind you. Not that showy kind. The deep kind.
She didn't reply, but her silence wasn't empty. It was listening. Mr. Lem gave a dry chuckle and scratched the side of his face.
They been stirring since word got out you was back. Some of 'em curious, some nervous, some just greedy, but all of 'em watching. Waiting to see if you gon' fold or crown.
Celeste looked past him to the altar for a moment. I'm not here to play queen.
You might not be.
He said, eyes locking on hers again.
But that don't stop folks from making a board and moving pieces. Whether you want to sit at the table or not, the game's already started.
He leaned forward now, elbows on his knees, his voice lowering into something quieter but somehow heavier.
Your grandma didn't leave you a shop. She left you a seat. There's people wanting it. Others wanting to keep you from filling it. And more still, who don't even know why they feel uneasy when they hear your name, but they do.
He paused, letting that settle.
That ain't fear you smell in the air, Celeste. That's old roots being disturbed. You walking through ground folks thought was fallow. Now they feel the rumble, and they don't know if it's thunder or you coming up through the dirt.
Celeste crossed her arms, thoughtful. You think I should lay low? Mr. Lem gave her a crooked smile, slow and warm.
I think you should stand firm. Ain't no storm worth a damn that backed off because the wind got loud. But be smart. Watch who comes smiling. You already done shook the bones. Now just be sure you know which ones want to stand with you, and which ones want to bury you.
He leaned back again, body tired but spirit sharp.
And don't you ever forget,
he added, tapping his stick once on the floor.
You ain't alone. Not now. Not ever. We walking with you, even when it feel like you walking by yourself.
Celeste looked at him then, really looked, and saw the truth beneath the words. There were battles still coming, but her people weren't gone. They were just waiting for her to rise. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Ashes at the Crossroads, Part 1. If Celeste's story moved you, intrigued you, or left you wondering what shadows lie ahead, like this video to show your support. Share it with someone who loves powerful storytelling, and subscribe to Blue Fae Press to stay connected to our world of magic, mystery, and deep roots. Be sure to drop a comment below. Tell us what you felt, what you saw, or who you think truly walks with Celeste. And don't stop here. Watch part 2 to see how the crossroads begin to burn.